Hi, Lorcan. How are you doing? Sarah from
Hi.
the evening.
Yeah, good. Thanks. How are you?
Great, thank you. Thanks for taking the time. What a movie. Huge congrats. Kind of a waking nightmare is maybe one way to describe it. You're sort of putting the audience and Nicolas Cage, well, or rather his character, through the ringer via some kind of rumination on masculinity, identity, memory. How do you describe it to people when they say, "Oh, what can I expect when I come in to see The Surfer?"
It is a subjective, weird journey of this guy who has everything together, but he's putting all of his hopes on fixing his life and his relationships on buying this home, and he almost has to undergo what happens in the film over like 5 days in order to learn that that isn't what he really needs. What he needs is just to go surfing with his son. To me, it's quite a funny, weird film. And I think it's because it's this subjective journey, like you're going with his character and the audience experience everything he experiences. It's quite an intense, wild ride of a film that you can kind of think about after watching it. And on one level, it's like a psychological thriller with action and comedy and drama. On another level, there's it's like a Jungian journey or something that you can analyze on a more philosophical level if you so desire.
Taking us back kind of to the initial idea or the roots of the story. I know you and Thomas Martin, sort of over 10 years almost, maybe had been sort of thinking about doing something together. And
Mm,
perhaps this shared love of, new wave Australian cinema and a new phrase I didn't know before, surf noir.
yeah.
No, that was a sort of subgenre. So maybe you can talk a bit about, perhaps initially wanting to collaborate with him, but how you kind of came up with this setting, this story, this character.
Yeah, so Tom and I met in 2012, and we both had short films with Tribeca Film Festival, and we hung out and we got to know each other. But I always find, like, with collaborators, it always takes years, really. It's not even on purpose, it just is the way it works that, like, and you keep on getting to know each other better over that time and chatting, just talking about other things tangentially. It took a long time before, I think, yeah, it might have been 2019 or something. Tom sent me like a couple of pages for this project called The Surfer that he had been inspired by a fight that he saw in Sydney, and two guys who were surfing, they came out of their wetsuits, put on their suits, and then they started having like a physical brawl, punching the shit out of each other on the beach. And it got him thinking about, who are these guys when they're obviously, he was imagining one's like a dentist and the other's a lawyer or something, that like they're obviously during the day they seem normal, and but when they're down on the beach there's something kind of more aggressive going on around like tribalism, localism, ownership. Yeah, he sent me an article. It was in the Guardian about a place called Lanuda Bay in California, about these so like another super wealthy coastal kind of enclave where there's like I think it's a kind of a crescent shaped beach with these modernist houses built up into the cliff top, and they're all owned by millionaires, hedge fund managers, bankers, lawyers. And if you try and surf there, they will beat the shit out of you. Obviously, again, they have like a public facing image which they can go around in society and seem perfectly normal. But then they have this more primal, weird, violent ownership over the beach, and they're very protective. So that was sort of in the outline that he sent me. And then we just started talking about, yeah, we're both like really into new wave Australian cinema and how we could maybe make a film, like a contemporary version of one of those kind of films that we liked, but like looking at masculinity in crisis from a more contemporary angle, and have this go on this journey with this character to explore all of these ideas in a kind of much more contemporary Australian setting. So then Yeah, we we sent the project around. We tried to find producers who would want to do it, and Leonora Darby in the UK read it, liked it, and said, "Okay, let's get the ball rolling." And we found co-producers in Australia and offered it to Nick Cage, and he said yes. And then suddenly we were making a film. It all happened very quickly in the tail part, but like years of chatting and all of that beforehand.
And it's got such a distinctive look and feel to it. I mean, obviously, one like almost, I feel like the heat could be a
Yeah.
character. That's not too much of a stretch.
Mm.
Like that's adding to the intensity and it's really coming through the screen. So, and like the way the colors pop,
Mm.
and we're almost kind of following what's happening to him in real time, not quite, but almost. So what sort of mode did you want to put the audience in to kind of sort of raise the stakes, raise the tension, make it feel very visceral?
That was all in the story, So then it's trying to like translate that on screen, but like coming at it from Nick's character's perspective, he's got this warped nostalgic memory of growing up in this place that almost would have felt like 60s 70s when he was there as a child. So the film sort of leans into that aesthetic. We're also inspired by Frank Perry's film The Swimmer with Burt Lancaster, where in terms of the colors and the skin tones and everything, everyone got very tanned. So in our film, we had all the actors had to go through tanning every morning, so they come out this kind of leathery, sun-baked characters. Yeah, I mean a lot of the sun and the heat and everything had to ratchet up throughout the film. So it starts out quite like idyllic and nice, beautiful beach. Then there's this undercurrent of violence. And then as things progress, it gets hotter and hotter, and he starts losing more and more stuff. We use a lot of kind of very flary lenses that are like vintage lenses with a contemporary camera. We use these P vintage Panavision lenses with the RE35. Used a lot of hot colors in the film, just in terms of like costume and all the production design, art department. Everything's like red and yellow and orange and burnt, kind of rusty colors to help make the audience feel the heat, and use flame bars under the camera to help create like heat distortion, and using like perspex bendy mirrors, like reflecting Nick's state of mind that starts stretching and bending and warping in the heat of the Australian summer. But then also through sound design and music, bringing in cicadas and the kookaburra laughing at him, and this score that's very nostalgic and dreamlike as well, that really kind of sucks you into this weird fever dream of a story.
Of course, Nicolas Cage. I mean, what an experience it must have been to work with him, and not just because of his obviously iconic status in our film industry, but also just the fact that he just seems quite fearless and so gung-ho. I think I remember you saying something similar about like getting Eva Green in, like really sort of willing to go on this ride with you, and he just goes for it. I mean, I didn't even know how much was in the script, whether any of it was like improvised, if it's not too much of a spoiler. It's like the puddle and the rat and all this kind of thing. I mean, what was it like getting him on board, but also just going all in with him?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, he's like, I think that's what attracted him, to the story. He reads the script and he's like, "Oh yeah, this is going to be wild," and then we get on a call and he's like, "Where do you think of shooting?" I was like, "Oh, in Australia, in a little remote place." And he's like, "Great," because he loves adventure and loves to do new things, likes to be pushed. I mean, like I think like he was at his happiest when he was like cracking raw eggs into his mouth, up in the standing in this like in the bush in Australia in the heat, with just me and Radek, the cinematographer beside him, and I remember he was just laughing, going, "Yeah, this is great," when we were doing this. And like things like the drinking out of the puddle. It's funny, that was something that he wanted to do, and he mentioned like when we had a first call or maybe second call or something, just running through the script, he was like, "Oh yeah, I could be like drinking out of a puddle," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I took that down." I was like, "That's great," and then Tom included it in the script, and then we're shooting it, and the props master had put a kind of silicon mold into this indentation in the ground so he wouldn't actually be drinking out of the ground in case like there was piss or something there. And he showed Nick where it was, and Nick would say to him, like, "I'm not drinking out of a puddle." And then the guy came over to me and was like, "Yeah, Nick says," I was like, "Oh," so I had to go over to Nick and was like, reminded was like, "This is the puddle. Remember? We're talking about drinking out of a puddle. I'm going to put cigarette butts in." And everything's like, "Oh, yeah, okay." That was like, it was like Lipton Ice or something with some fake cigarettes. But yeah, he likes doing all that kind of thing. So there was a certain amount of improv then as well in terms of like leaving room for that kind of thing, where he's completely delirious walking around the car park. I think in the script it said, he was completely delirious walking around the car park asking people, had they seen, had you seen Mike? Have you seen Mike Broker? He kind of got into, he'd just eaten the raw eggs. So he had that bit of energy in his mind and in his character. So then we shot on like an 8mm lens, so you could see absolutely everything was quite distorted. So all the rest of the crew had to like hide in the cars, and get down low. We follow him around the car park, and he's started talking about wanting to make his wife dinner on the balcony. He's going to make her clams casino and puttanesca pasta, and all this stuff was just flowing out from it. Was he ended up continuing on and started singing House of Pain, Jump Around, with a rat in his mouth, swinging it around the place, which didn't end up in the film, but it was pretty amazing to watch. He just got into this sort of shamanistic place, with free flowing thoughts. But yeah, things like that, and things like like you mentioned, the rat. That was the rat going into Alex's mouth. That was something that Nick came up with. The rat was in the script, and Nick just became very attached to the prop and wanted to keep it in his pocket, and wasn't really sure why yet. But then I think it was the next day he told me this idea that he'd been watching Sabrina, the Audrey Hepburn film, just before coming out to Australia, and he had made this connection between Humphrey Bogart taking an olive out of a martini glass and shoving it in someone's mouth and saying, "Eat it," with him having this rat. And later on during this confrontation, he was going to like shove it in someone's mouth and say, "Eat it, eat the rat." So yeah, that's how his imagination works, I guess. And it was like, but it wasn't like just spontaneous. He just could and just goes and does that. He talked to me about, would I consider doing that? But of course, I was like, yeah, I mean, that sounds great. It's a good idea. If it doesn't work, we can cut it from the film, but let's try it.
So I guess from like other roles you've seen him do, you maybe knew he had that in him, but maybe you didn't know when he walked onto set with you, whether exactly which direction it's going to go in. So did he even surprise you in some ways?
Yeah, I think so. And in terms of like, I think, we sort of shot chronologically as much as possible. So when we started shooting, it was all kind of more normal stuff. So it gave time to kind of get to know each other. And then I think because we both have a similar sense of humor and we're into the same kind of films, we're finding the vibe of it and seeing it come together and seeing the colors and the light and I use these very long lenses for these like super close-ups. Wanted to see Nick's face as no one's really ever properly seen him before, get right in there and use his face as almost a landscape. And because we're, talking about masculinity in the film, I asked him to grow out his eyebrows and his nasal hair and his ear hair so that we could really kind of get a sense of this sort of manscape, And same with Julian, these kind of like very hairy, long eyebrows, hairy ears. So we're kind of seeing all that, and the editor Tony Cranston started cutting the film on like day 2. So I was starting to see the rushes come in, and how they were cutting together. So you kind of get a sense of the vibe of it. So then things that you might not have thought of while in prep, once you're actually doing it with Nick, kind of there's a little bit more flexibility. He's such a big character, and he's got such a familiar voice and great texture that like doing things that are a bit more extreme work well with him, you know? And same with like then he can attract bigger music as well. Yeah, so everything kind of flows through his character really.
I think, as you said at the beginning, actually, it's one of these movies where when you're watching it in a way, it doesn't really feel like it's taking itself too seriously. You know, there's a playfulness to it.
Yeah.
Maybe it does sort of seep in, and there are, you know, there are these little moments where we sort of hear, you know, the speeches from the sort of gang, like this kind of cult-like ideology around, you know, how to deal with masculinity in the modern age.
Mm.
So do you think there is a comment in there, you know, about this crisis that's going on, and
Yeah.
you know, or the idea there is this animal inside every man, just, you know, beneath the surface,
Mm.
or about materialism, you know, the fact he has to strip away everything in order to kind of find himself again. So, you know, what do you think some people might, you know, end up thinking about when they come out the cinema?
Yeah, I mean, I hope all of those things. I mean, that's the thing. On one level, I think it can be enjoyed as just a kind of psychological thriller and it's good fun and everything. But then, yeah, it is a look, an examination of masculinity in crisis, about belonging, how people feel the need to belong, and that's linked to place as well, belonging to place, being an outsider, dealing with memory of a nostalgia and the self. But like I think a lot of the Bay Boy kind of guys are these sort of lost individuals who just want to belong to something. And Jude McMahon's character, Scally, really, because he's charismatic and he has philosophical ideas, can really kind of draw these guys in. And then he wants power. He wants to be this kind of father figure to these people as well. But you know, it's easy to, once you have that kind of power, to be dangerous and to misuse it. But I think ultimately all the guys want to do is belong to like a little club, you know, and then that's seductive even to Nick's character, and he almost gets drawn into it, you know. So all of those elements are interesting, I think, to an audience, so that when they come out afterwards, they can discuss it, and they can also discuss the sort of, you know, what they think actually happened throughout the film, because it's so subjective, and you're in Nick's character's mind throughout the film. It can be picked apart and can be looked at from different angles, which I always find fascinating with the film.
And very quickly, do you know what you're going to be working on next? How do you sort of see your filmography, you know, the trajectory it's taking, you know, from Vivarium, SIBO, now this one, you know, where might you take it next?
I'm working on a couple of different projects. Not sure exactly which one we're going to do next. Probably either this film called Goliath, which is a sort of near future dystopian fable about creating monsters in order to start wars. Or another project called Spirit of the Road, which is about a guy who gets trapped in an AI self-drive car that's having an existential breakdown.
Both sound brilliant. Let's see what's next.
Very different, but both good fun.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. Huge congrats on the movie. It looks like you've been having a lot of fun taking it around festivals and Q&As and stuff as well. So can't wait for everyone else to see it.